Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this Pride Perspectives webinar. Today is Tuesday, January 17th. I like to say that because we do record these, 2023, and it's nice to have a perspective of where we are. We are joined tonight, and I will let people do their own introductions, but first, just a little housekeeping. As we are all so familiar with Zoom, maybe too familiar now, as is the case, we use the Q&A feature. So just scroll down to the bottom of your screen if you have any questions at all during the webinar, and we'll try our best to get to answer those. Similarly, the questions that you submitted with your registration, we're going to try to answer all of those. But if anything comes up and you have another question, feel free to pop that into the Q&A. We will save time at the end, and we will try to honor everybody's time and wrap this up in just an hour. So we look forward to chatting with you about educating boys, what we do best here at Trinity-Pawling. And I'm going to start the introductions by introduce herself, Katie Berlandy.
Good evening. Yes, I'm Katie Allen Berlandy, and I'm Dean of Counseling here at Trinity-Pawling School. And I also teach a psychology class, an elective course. And this is my 8th year here at Trinity-Pawling. And I have a son here in the 8th grade.
Thank you. Tom Morris, you're next up on my screen, so we'll go right to left.
Hi everyone, I'm Tom Morris. I'm Associate Head of School. I'm halfway through my 2nd year here at Trinity-Pawling. I'm grateful to be a part of this community. And I teach a 3 elective series in international relations.
Terrific. Danny Lennox is popping up next here. Father Lennox.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be with you this evening. Yeah, as Amy said, my name is Danny Lennox. I'm the chaplain of the school. I also teach religion, world religions, philosophy, ethics, and eco-theology. So I'm happy to be with you this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you. And second to last, Chris Gilman.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Chris Gilman, I graduated, I'm an alum of the school, graduated in 2005. I'm the director of the Center for Learning Achievement, coach hockey lacrosse, live in a dorm predominantly with freshmen and sophomores, and I work with the senior class and try to help them through their senior year.
Wonderful. And certainly, Bill, I'm not including you, but last of our panelists, but certainly not least, Tariq Smith.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tariq Smith. This is my 2nd year at Trinity-Pawling. I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Self-Awareness. I teach English 3 for mostly juniors, some sophomores, and I'm the head varsity basketball coach at the school.
Wonderful. And Bill, I guess we will let you start off and talk about what brought us here tonight, which is connecting Trinity-Pawling's mission with what we do here. So without further ado.
Good. Well, thank you, Amy, and good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you again for one of our Pride Perspective series. My name is Bill Taylor. I'm head of school. This is my 8th year in this position. It's my 21st year at Trinity-Pawling, but separated by 14 years where I was head of a co-ed school before returning here 8 years ago. So I've got an interesting perspective on both co-ed and all boys, and as do several folks on this panel. But we're here tonight to talk about mission-centric teaching and learning and how we educate boys at Trinity-Pawling. And I think that's I'm very excited about this topic because we're so grounded in our mission, and we just recently, a year ago, completed a strategic planning process, and our mission changed with that process. not that the school changed, but missions often change after a period of time, and ours did as well. And so our mission, consistent with our new strategic vision, is that Trinity-Pawling will provide an educational experience that makes a transformational difference in the lives of its students by enabling them to discover and pursue their distinctive gifts and talents. And I think that mission statement packs a lot into a single sentence and is really evocative of what we do here on a daily basis, inside and outside of the classroom. But we're going to talk a lot tonight about the inside the classroom transformation that takes place. And the idea of transformation, it's an aspirational concept, it's an aspirational word, and it was chosen intentionally to be sort of the action verb of or the active description of the process of our teaching and learning environment here at Trinity-Pawling. And the reason it was chosen is that the people who were putting together this strategic plan, many of whom were alumni, some of whom were past parents of the school, some of whom were faculty at the school, all sort of came to the same general description. And the description was something like this: there's not a day that goes by that I don't reflect on how my life was changed for the better because of my experience at Trinity-Pawling School. That's a powerful statement coming from an alum, coming from a past parent, coming from a faculty member. And so we wanted to dig into this and really, flesh this out. Why, what is it about this experience that is transformational? And I think when you believe that anything is that powerful, and certainly in the world of education, you have to think of that in the concept of growth. Your life cannot be transformed. You can't change and constantly sort of move forward in life without growth. And in the world of schools, the world of education, this idea of a growth mindset is extremely important. And there's been really fascinating research on this idea of a growth mindset. And a growth mindset is to be best understood as juxtaposed next to a fixed mindset. And a fixed mindset might be described as, I'm good at history, or I'm good at math, or I'm not good at science, I'm not good at art. And those are words that I remember saying all the time as a student, especially the art one. I'm no good at art. I don't want to take art. I'm not creative. And schools, unfortunately, can reinforce that type of fixed mindset. Sometimes by grades, sometimes by a experience that a student has in a class, and so forth. By contrast, a growth mindset is a mindset that develops that where a student or somebody who's out of school and as an adult is open to trying new things, open to learning, open to taking healthy risks, where they're constantly looking for new opportunities to grow or to be transformed by an experience. So this idea of making a transformational difference that's in our mission is directly linked to a commitment to provide a growth mindset. In the research that goes into how students can develop either a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, the research is pretty telling, and that is a focus on effort and a recognition that effort is important, is instrumental is directly correlated to developing a growth mindset. And a lot of this research is now 10-something years old, but the focus on effort at Trinity-Pawling goes back to its founding in 1907. And it was a core belief of the school's founder, Dr. Gamage, who famously said, the only time a boy fails is when he fails to try. And over time at Trinity-Pawling, this ethos of effort has developed into an integrated approach to how we go about teaching and learning. We have an effort challenge here at Trinity-Pawling. And that means every student is recognized and rewarded on the basis of how hard they're working in all aspects of life, in the classroom, outside of classroom, in the dormitory, in athletics and co-curricular activities and attendance and so forth. And that focus on effort is instrumental in developing a growth mindset. The other thing that's very important about being open to this idea of transformation is developing a sense of comfort with vulnerability. And that there's also great research on that the more comfortable people are with being vulnerable, the more open they are to significant learning and growth. And it's sort of, letting your guard down in order to try new things. It's linked to a growth mindset and so forth. And here's where I think that Trinity-Pawling as a boys' school lends itself by its structure, by its design, to being more open to developing a transformational difference in the lives of the students. Boys in an all boys environment are more willing to be vulnerable because of a number of factors. Maybe the stakes aren't as high. They're more willing to make mistakes. They're not boys don't have very long memories when it comes to seeing about what they've all tried or what a friend has tried. And that creates a safe space to take healthy risks in the classroom, take healthy risks outside of the classroom. And the data about boys and their learning right now is really quite concerning. 2/3 of the top high school graduates in terms of being measured by GPA are girls. In other words, only 1/3 of the top high school graduating students by rank in GPA, so how they're graded, are boys. There are, in terms of college matriculation, 60% of college freshmen are women, 40% are men. College graduation rates, more men do not graduate college than women. And if the ratio is now 60-40 going to college, fewer of those 40% are finishing college than the 60% that are going. And that is concerning. So boys really need to be in an environment where their confidence is going to grow, and where they're going to be open to sort of a growth mindset, and where there is I believe, a promise of transformation. And that is core in our mission. And confidence is a big factor of transformation. We're going to come back a little later and talk about the other half of this mission statement, which has to do with gifts and talents. But I want to, just focus a little bit more on this idea of confidence, self-awareness in boys. And, Tom, you and I do share a perspective, because we spent time in co-ed day schools. So if you compare a co-ed day environment with an all boys environment, I'm interested in you sort of sharing your thoughts on how you've seen the difference in boys in both sort of a co-ed day environment versus an all-boys boarding environment?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think the way I would phrase it is that the road to, or the path to vulnerability with an adult at an all boys boarding school is a lot shorter than that at a co-ed day school. I think here what I've witnessed is a very strong culture led by our seniors who at some point or another in their time here have been vulnerable. And I've had to open up to a, to a trusted adult and say, I am not, I've got something going on, or I tried something new, it didn't work out. And that trusted adult helped them sort of navigate that. And I think too, here, the boys are surrounded by adults who care very deeply about their growth and their experience. And the boys know that. The boys internalize that. And those relationships that develop open the door to trust, and that trust opens the door to vulnerability and also growth into greater confidence. It's really pretty powerful to watch, still sort of as somebody on the outside looking in.
Thank you. And you mentioned trust, you mentioned relationships. Those are all really critical core aspects of a healthy social, emotional learning environment that is critical if an educational environment is going to be transformational. I mean, it can't be transformational unless we're really focused on the social, emotional learning aspect of the experience. And Katie, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. This is sort of right in your wheelhouse as Dean of Counseling.
Yes, absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Social emotional learning can be formalized or informalized. And there are schools that have formalized learning curriculum around the social emotional well-being. And we definitely do some of that. But I think we also do a very fine job of providing more of the informal or sort of mentoring of social and emotional wellness in many areas. And faculty do that and students do that just by how they conduct themselves. But one of the things that we know to be incredibly enriching, and it falls in the line of connectedness, right? And a part of something bigger than ourselves, are the opportunities that we have here at Trinity-Pawling each week to gather and to be in each other's presence as a school community. We, of course, have our chapel in the chapel 3 times a week. We have our Monday morning meeting. There are advisory gatherings, get-togethers, and all of those opportunities give us that opportunity again for connectedness and for meaning. And through that meaning, we become a part of something bigger than ourselves, our common good. And that, amongst many other things, then allows each student here to be more, as you say, vulnerable, but willing to engage in this community, which then in turn is a very healthy endeavor. So I will put that out there for right now. And that's sort of how I see social emotional learning happening here on the ground every single day. And these boys know, I think if you really ask them, that they have something really special here in the ability to gather in ways and in places that carry meaning and growth.
I think that's a really important point, Katie, that in any school environment, but particularly a boarding school environment, time is your most precious commodity. And how schools protect time and allocate time will reflect their priorities. And you mentioned gathering. We gather as a community 4 mornings a week. We gather 4 days a week for family style lunches. That that is, over 3 hours a week, dedicated to, regular structured time for the community to come together. And there's tons of unstructured time for smaller communities to come together. But that's a lot of time dedicated for the entire community to come together. And Danny, I'm going to sort of pivot to you, and in your role of chaplain, talk a little bit about the value of the community coming together and what that, how that influences sort of the energy and life of the school.
Yeah, I think that, I think it probably goes without saying for everyone who's listening. And I mean, we're all kind of grappling with the modern world and the challenges that come with kind of narrowing sometimes our universe to these little tiny screens that we all carry in our pocket. And I think one of the things that I'm always conscious of in the chapel is, not only are we hearing about kind of the great values of the moral universe and the great stories of the world, but there's something extremely powerful about just being with people in proximity, people that people that you think people you need to know, and that kind of coming together and becoming together, I think creates this kind of growth opportunity to which you can't replicate kind of in the silos of the internet. So, I think when we look at our neighborhoods, when we look at our campus, when we look at the chapel, when we look at the dining hall, we're looking at a model that says, people need to be together. They need to gather around a meal together. It's as old as the sun, this concept of being together and learning from each other and learning to listen to each other, that we gain that kind of confidence in ourselves and our own ideas, but we also learn how to be vulnerable and to hear what people have to say. So, hearing our boys get up and give chapel talks is, I think one of the richest experiences you could ever have, as a young person, as an old person, seeing someone step up those steps into the pulpit and give it a go and share what they think they know about the wisdom of the world is extremely important. And, I think the pandemic gave us some insight into what it feels like not to have those opportunities. Being back in the chapel full time, full throttle, I think brings us together, and it makes us better people.
We had an opportunity on Saturday as part of our Martin Luther King Jr. sort of remembrance weekend to come together in our institutes, two of our institutes, the Institute for Citizenship and the Institute for Leadership, planned a really marvelous morning of learning. And Danny, your group was sort of focused on sort of the rise of hate in the world. And at one point, you sort of asked the students to sort of reflect and to write down on what has been lost in recent years. And it really struck me how quickly so many of the boys in this group talked about the loss of people coming together. And
sort of a universal response from the group we had, saying like that was the loss. So I think that's what our gathering together, that critical component of our common lives together, is to be able to gather, and then you can go forth and in better spirits, in a better sense of who you are and a better sense of who others are.
And I think if you think of that, and you're absolutely right, if the boys are identifying that as something that our culture has lost, yet it's something that is prioritized here, it cannot help but be an agent of transformation in how they experience their learning here. Because it's something that's not happening as much or at all out in the larger world. And if you think about the power of what that does, sharing community, and then you think about that kind of energy entering into the learning experience, how much different it's going to be.
Bill, I
Right,
think
and I
back
think it-
to, go ahead, Danny.
Go
Sorry.
ahead, Gil. You're good.
I
you're
think
good.
back too, I know it was during COVID, but I remember, it was nearly impossible for us to gather as a community, but I remember at the, throughout the year as for class meetings, we have, a couple times a month, we'll meet, I'll meet with the seniors and we'll go over a bunch of relative items that might be pertinent for them in the college process, wherever it may be. But Bill, the seniors approached you and, from our class, we meet in the chapel. That's just our location. That's, a big enough space to accommodate the senior class. And I remember, they sort of went to you at the end of the year and before graduation and were like, can we have one class meeting that's in person so we could do so and come together as a group and as a class. I mean, I know it's a lesser scale and it's not the whole community because that was really challenging that year and we did everything virtually. But it just, to me, that still sticks with me as a moment with, something I was close with the seniors, and they're just like, we want to be able to sit in the pews together and have a class meeting. And I didn't know my class meetings were that exciting that they wanted to listen to me live, but it always sticks in the back of my mind. And we talk about community and coming together. That's one of the first things that sort of pops up and comes to the front of my mind.
Yeah. And that meant a lot. And then they actually came back and asked me, can we have a chapel in the chapel? So yeah, I think if you think about that in the context of transformation, community is such a central component of that.
I'm remembering for those of us who were planning all summer for when we were returning from COVID, we didn't factor in the immense desire of the boys to be here, to be back on campus. And I guess I can only speak for myself, personally blown away by no, we have to get back. We just have to be there and be able to experience that again. It was magical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I could add to that, I think, there are a few silver linings to COVID and the experience that we all had, but I'll speak directly for the boys. But therein lies an enormous social, emotional lesson, right? That they learned through the not having to what they knew that they needed. And so I can tell you that, I haven't been here that long and complaints haven't been all that many, but I haven't heard one boy complain about being here on campus, or I have to do this, or I really wish I didn't have to go there. It's and maybe I'm just not hearing it, but I think there's a renewed sense of the value of this experience here at Trinity-Pawling School, and then their own feelings of being valued and heard. When that happens, that is when they are then able to pursue their own gifts and talents. If they don't have that foundation of feeling valued and heard, then the gifts and talents won't percolate. So I think we provide that foundation here for the boys.
Thank you, Katie. I'm glad you sort of transitioned into the gifts and talents part, because this is, of course, the second half of the mission. That the school is going to provide an educational experience that will make a transformational difference in the lives of its students by enabling them to discover and pursue their distinctive gifts and talents. So that's how we endeavor to go about this. The transformational difference comes because we have all these things in the environment in the mix that we just talked about. But because of all that in the mix, we're allowed to have an avenue toward which these boys can discover and pursue their distinctive gifts and talents. So what does that mean? Really what that means is creating an experience where boys will have a deeper sense of their own self-awareness, where they will begin to discover that they have distinctive gifts and talents. Most teenagers don't even think about that. Many adults don't think about that. of what makes them a distinctive human being, what makes them special, what makes them unique, what makes them unlike any other human being around. And that, of course, is the mystery of life. But those gifts and talents are simply those things that are special, that are distinctive to each individual. And we all have them. We all have them. And that's the first thing that we try to emphasize to the boys, that they have these distinctive gifts and talents, and they need to believe that they do before they can even begin to discover what theirs may be. And that idea is really powerful. And then we create different learning avenues, different learning experiences that will allow them to explore those gifts and talents. And I'm going to come back to that. But Danny, I'm going to pivot to you again, because, this idea of gifts and talents, they hear a lot about in chapel. And talk a little bit about how the chapel experience and the community experience endeavors to educate our students, the boys, about gifts and talents.
Well, I think it's certainly sort of in the vernacular, in how we go about and comport ourselves in the day-to-day. So it's definitely part of our grammar and our language, but it's also something beyond that. I think it's really acted out and embodied in important ways. So I think there's an exchange that happens between someone recognizing a gift, and then the reciprocity that comes with that is recognizing and providing space for that gift to kind of grow and blossom and seed or whatever. And I think that space is the critical element that is showcased at Trinity-Pawling. We see it with so many of our boys where there's an acknowledgement or a spark within them that then has room to kind of gain momentum. And so often, sadly, I would say, not just in students, but even in adults, those sort of pilot lights that burn within us don't have an opportunity to kind of glow brightly all the time. And very often they're kind of, pushed underground sometimes. But I think that space that we provide as a school, as a community, amongst the students and faculty, is kind of the most critical space for transformation, for confidence, and for the blossoming of these gifts and talents. And, I think we see it in the chapel all the time, the risks and the trust the boys put in getting up and doing a chapel talk, even in an attempt to sing a hymn. I think we see it on the sports field. I think I see it in my classes. Today I was in an ethics class, and I looked around. It's a big class, and I think there was like 7 hands up in the air, where there were, students wanting to ask a question or field a question. And that's a space then that says, hey, as teachers, as faculty, we're here to kind of enable space to be available where those gifts can grow and where they can develop, as opposed to just kind of getting sometimes pushed under or pushed away in other situations that don't allow that opportunity for growth to occur.
Thank you. And Tom, really the people who are put in charge of helping the boys discover their gifts and talents are their teachers. It's what Danny just described in his class. It's the teacher who sees something in a student well before that student sees it in himself, which is also a good definition of what a mentor is. But that happens in a student-centered learning environment, in a learning environment that emphasizes that the students are really at the core of the learning, as opposed to the teacher being at the core of the teaching. So Tom, talk a little bit about the importance of being student-centered as a means for students to gain a deeper sense of their own self-awareness, but also being open to discovering their gifts and talents.
Well, I think, being student-centered really first compels us as educators to get to know the kids in our classroom, the kids in our advisory groups, the kids in our dorms, kids on our teams, whatever, as truly sort of whole three-dimensional human beings, whole three-dimensional boys, and really work to understand them as individuals, which then enables us to form the relationships with them that enables us to help them take that right healthy risk. It also, I think, compels us to think about our work in service of their growth, not necessarily for ourselves as educators. Of course, we all derive a great deal of satisfaction from doing this, but really, as a student-centered school, we're thinking about how does our work shape their experience and create opportunities for them to learn and grow and take the right risks.
Chris, you're in charge of the Center for Learning Achievement, so you're working a lot with boys who learn differently, and have and they are learning how to grow in self-awareness and in confidence as themselves as learners, and they often will come about their discovery of their gifts and talents a bit differently than students who may not learn differently. And when I say differently, they're learning differently than how most schools teach. And that's not necessarily the case here. So talk about a little bit about this idea of gifts and talents from your perspective.
Yeah, I think we do a good job of identifying who these students are and how they learn differently. But making sure, back to, you mentioned something earlier, Bill, that the more comfortable they are with vulnerability, right, the more opportunity. And I think having them sort of be comfortable with their own learning style and making them aware of maybe what that style is. So we'll spend some time as we start to identify these students and work through some of the strategies and plans that we could put in and different sort of strategies that work for them and how they may learn and grow. They start to get a little bit more confidence. A lot of students, and boys in particular, don't have a ton of confidence when it comes to in the classroom and success in the classroom. So we make it, we make them sort of realize that they're successful students. They need to sort of cultivate and find a way to find that success. And we do that through a number of different strategies and study skills and working with them through sort of educational plans and different note-taking strategies. How they may sort of start to achieve success and see success is then sort of, you see the sort of light bulb go off and they know they're capable of being a good student.
One of the things that we've been doing more of the last several years is finding different ways to assess student learning. And different ways for students to demonstrate their learning. So, we still will give some exams in some classes at the end of the term, but faculty also have the option to give a project instead of an exam. And I think the last fall term, there were probably more projects than there were exams. That actually resonates more with how boys learn best. Boys learn best by doing, by learning experientially. We have a whole part of the calendar that is dedicated to this. It's called our winter session between our Thanksgiving and winter breaks at a 15, 16-day span here, where the boys are all doing something differently. They're not in traditional classes per se. They're engaged in experiential learning, project-based learning. So, I'll open it up to the group of what you all saw in terms of boys sort of getting excited about learning in a different way, boys sort of demonstrating their learning in a different way, maybe in a more tactile way, maybe in a dramatic way, in creative ways. What stood out to you all from this past winter session?
All right, I'll go first. I think, as I think about the senior independent projects, to me, those are the ultimate or the SIPs, as we call them, those are the ultimate in student-centered learning, in that, the seniors come up with their own project descriptions, their own project goals, their own, learning outcomes they want to achieve. And I think a great sign of that, of winter session really taking root, is that our rising seniors now arrive at their senior year with an idea in their head of what they want to do. It's starting to really gain traction. And there were some fantastic projects, some that ranged from, a very thoughtful fundraiser commemorating a member of the TP community that lost their life last year, way to connect two schools. We had a student do a 3D rendering of repurposing one of our dormitories as a student center. And it was really, really fantastic. And, and the sort of the range of projects runs that whole gamut, from sort of the community oriented to the hands-on and sort of speculative almost.
Bill, last year I was able to do the Global Collaborative Challenge, which is what most juniors do, or all juniors and some PGs get a chance to do. And, working on research and teamwork and team building. But, for me, I think public speaking and present, how they present and presenting skills that I think, again, was something that sort of might have been lost within the last few years. Not a lot of people, it's hard for some people to get up in chapel and sit in the pulpit and give that talk, but it's really interesting to watch the process of, there's a couple of different rough drafts of the presentation and sort of see, at first the students are sort of nervous, they rush through it. It's got to be 12 minutes. And, oftentimes the first one's like 6, and they're sort of they're very anxious and nervous to be up there. And then the second rough draft, it's a little bit smoother. And by the time they get to that finished product and they present in full room full of people, it's almost like they've been speaking in full audiences and full rooms all their lives. One student in particular, he was one of the students who stood up and presented on Saturday for our MLK work. And I thought he was an unbelievable public speaker. And when I mentioned something to him, he was like, before my GCC, like I never would have stood up and volunteered to be the guy who shared my thoughts. So, in my head, that's one of those other thoughts that it just kind of comes to me when you sort of say those things. It's something that he discovered and he never knew he could do and never had the confidence to do it. But he sort of learned how to stand up and how to give a presentation throughout the GCC. It's not just researching the topic, but it's also all the things that sort of go into it. And, I thought on Saturday, I was blown away at how well he spoke and the confidence he had up there. And so I had to ask him, and he's like, it was all from, what I learned in the winter session.
I can say a little bit about my winter session with 5 boys, seniors, doing at their SIPs, as Tom described. And each of them was doing something in the service of others. So whether it was a fundraiser for an organization that came to speak to the boys and the rest of the community this fall called One Love, or another boy is putting together, it's sort of a little ongoing project, a mindfulness app. And there are meditations on this app that are done by other Trinity-Pawling students. And then others obviously on top of that. And then another boy who struggled with some mental health issues, he has put together an Instagram, a Trinity-Pawling mental health Instagram for the boys. And he is going to be giving a chapel talk on the 25th of January. So that was the thread that went through every one of the SIPs of the boys I worked with, and that was pretty powerful. The dedication to service of others, common good.
Wonderful. this is not in our mission statement, but it's one of the 5 objectives in our strategic vision that grows from our mission, and that is the importance of belonging, of being in a place where you feel you belong and you know that you belong. And I think if we don't work on that piece and really pay attention to the idea of belonging for every student, then we're not in a position to create an environment where self-awareness is going to be accentuated, where confidence is going to grow, where there will be a discovery of gifts and talents. So Tariq, I'd like to turn to you and have you talk a little bit about, you're in your second year as a young teacher. How does that idea of belonging sort of strike you as a young professional? And then, in your role with the boys, in your position of the director of DISA, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and self-awareness, how do you see that work of really belonging?
Yeah. Well, I think it starts with basically everything we've been preaching. Is just setting goals. I think that's one of the things that we did really well in the winter projects and the SIPs. And I think that's why it's very successful year in and year out. The guys get together, they have a goal to present a certain topic, and they have to work together for a couple of weeks. And they might not necessarily be people who they hang out with all the time. You have to learn how to branch out and work with other people. And also creating spaces of accountability is huge. And that's what we saw this past weekend when we were talking about various issues around the world regarding civil rights, human rights, and the guys did amazing. It was great to see everyone gathered together and having students lead and really, like Chris was talking about, stepping up and finding a new passion of being a public speaker. Like Katie was talking about the vulnerability and being able to step up and talk about difficult conversations. That's something that happens here on campus. And also, there's been numerous times where I'm in Mr. Morris's office and we have to talk to students and make sure that they have an understanding of what is acceptable in terms of equality on campus and what they can do to grow from that. For my 2 years being here, it's been amazing because I wholeheartedly believe that the faculty here on campus care about their students and they care about their craft. And it's just an amazing environment to be in. And I found out about this opportunity from an alum who was very close with Chris Gilman, and he comes back to campus now and he's in full support. So I think going forward, it's important for us to continue to build with our alums as well, because there are people who came here, were in these footsteps, and they're able to share their stories as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the aspects of my job that I enjoy immensely, is to work with alumni and to learn of their experience. And again, this sort of goes full circle to how we began. It's often the comments of the alumni who talk about, wow, what a transformational experience this was in my life, that I think about it all the time. And Trinity-Pawling has always sort of talked about the importance of its community. And that just sort of, part of it happens organically, but a large part of it comes about because we're we're intentional about bringing the community together. We're intentional about focusing on this idea of belonging, which is not a new concept. It's the core of any community. How to treat people with respect and dignity, and value them and value their own gifts and talents. And I noticed a couple questions that were submitted earlier about how is it for a student to transition into this community as a new 10th grader or a new 11th grader. That happens all the time, and it's a very welcoming community to come into, because the boys all were in that position at some point, and it's something that they value. They remember the older boy who sort of invited them to come in and sit down at the table at lunch or at dinner, or reached out to them in practice or in a classroom. And that, there was another question about international students. That has been the experience that has been relayed to me from international students, that it's been a very welcoming place to come into. And there is certainly a deep appreciation that the diversity of this community, including its neurodiversity that we spoke of earlier, is sort of an agent that enriches this sense of belonging, enriches the community. And all of that, if the community is strong, as we've been talking about, it makes it a safer place to be vulnerable. If it's a safer place to be vulnerable, then there's a deeper reservoir of self-awareness to be achieved. And when that happens, you have a deeper appreciation of your own distinction, your own gifts and talents, and it can become transformational. And that's sort of the cyclical process that we are working to create through our mission in the teaching and learning environment here at Trinity-Pawling. Amy, do we have any questions that have come in?
We do not. No, I just checked, and thank you, Bill, for checking the spreadsheet of questions that came in. I believe we answered any. If we missed any, we will get back to those of you who asked them, or please always reach out to either the admission department or one of us, any one of us. We're readily available to answer any questions. I think we've covered all of our bases, and wanted to remind those of you who might have heard some terms today that you're not familiar with. Our institutes, the Center for Learning Achievement, these are all topics of webinars that we've done in the past recently and have recorded on our website. So if there's something that you'd like to dig a little bit deeper in, make sure you visit the recording section of the website to find those. We will be hosting another webinar in the near future. Stay tuned. We don't have the exact date right now, but we will announce it, send announcements out, and certainly it'll be on our website as well. I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions and keep that chat open for another minute or so. But other than that, we will honor people's time and be finished a little bit before 8. Okay, so I think not seeing anything come in. So I wanted to thank everybody for being panelists, Katie, Tariq, Tom, Chris, and Danny, and Bill for having us here again tonight to discuss some really important things. Our mission is the heart of the school, and I think we did a good job, you guys, tying it all together. So thank you to those of you who tuned in and to those who are listening on the recording, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.
Hi, everybody.